Hello and welcome to India's World. Sri Lanka's President Mahinda Rajapaksa has called for a midterm election 2 years ahead of schedule. President Mahinda Rajapaksa is the candidate of the ruling United People's Freedom Alliance. He was first elected president in 2005, then again for a second term in 2010, and now he is seeking a third term. In a major upset, the opposition parties led by the United National Party or UNP have chosen Maithripala Sirisena as their common candidate. Only up to a week ago, he was Rajapaksa's Minister for Health. He was also the General Secretary of Rajapaksa's Sri Lanka Freedom Party, the main constituent of the ruling alliance. Sirisena defected from the ruling alliance a few hours after the snap election was announced. To discuss the evolving political situation in Sri Lanka and the importance of the impending presidential election, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, one of India's foremost diplomats. He was the Foreign Secretary of India. He was also India's ambassador to Egypt, Turkey, France and Russia. We have with us Professor S.D. Muni, a distinguished academic. He is one of our foremost experts on South Asia. He was professor at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and was also India's ambassador to Laos. And we have with us Mr. Srinivas Ramani. He is the Senior Assistant Editor of Economic and Political Weekly and follows the developments in Sri Lanka closely. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Srinivas, let me begin with you. Why has President Rajapaksa called an election 2 years before his term expired? Is his popularity declining? Is that the only reason?
More than clearly saying that his popularity is declining, you can say that the solid political coalition he had built before the prior elections, that seems to be fraying a bit now. You had the Sri Lankan Freedom Party's old guard, which seems to be tired of the centralization of power in the Rajapaksa family, and therefore they have more or less moved away to some extent from the Rajapaksa regime, and that's why you see a former the health minister till recently, Mr. Sirisena, moving away from the party and going and becoming the candidate of the opposition. So I think President Rajapaksa feels that if he holds elections early, maybe he can still cash in on the dividend that he had received after the win in the civil war, as long as the memories of those victories are fresh, and that dividend might not be there 2 years hence. So that's the reason why I think they have held elections quite quickly.
Okay. Professor Muni, there are some people who say that it's not the president who's in a great hurry to hold an election, it's the people around him who have access to power and pelf because of him, especially his family members. 90 departments of the government are controlled by the Rajapaksa family. And if his popularity declines, he were to lose 2 years later, these people lose all their access to power. So it is these people who have really persuaded him. Do you think that's the kind of pressure he's under?
Well, he may be under that pressure, but I refuse to believe that he himself is not aware of the erosion which is taking place. You know, he's an acute, I would say, political animal. I recall days when he was minister with Chandrika and did not want Lakshman to become the prime minister. He's absolutely politically
Lakshman Kadir Gamar.
Lakshman Kadir Gamar. He is absolutely politically clued, and the last elections, the by-elections which took place, very clearly underlined the erosion of SLFP and his coalition.
You're talking about the provincial council elections in Uva.
Yes, that's right. In which, and now one of the staunchest Sinhala party, the Jatiya Hela Urumaya, has actually gone away from the coalition, as he said very rightly. And he knows that the erosion of the base has started. So if he waits for 2 more years, it's not only his coterie is built by him. He can change the coterie any day. But somehow he has got the family on the board, which he is finding difficult to distance with.
Okay. Ambassador Sibal, do you think that one of the reasons really for this election, one of the reasons, is the international pressure that the president finds himself under? He thinks that if he gets a mandate before the UN Human Rights Commission report on war crimes in Sri Lanka comes out in March 2015, he should get a new mandate, and if he gets a new mandate, he becomes that much more powerful. Because do you think there's a possibility that if he's no longer the president, he might be tried for genocide, like Charles Taylor of Liberia or Milosevic of Serbia?
I think that's a possibility, that this is what he is thinking. And he might feel that if he gets the mandate from the people to that extent, he will be protected better from international pressure. Because as a democratically elected leader, despite all the controversy about him and his role during the last phase of the war against the LTTE, he would be able to secure himself from possible scenarios that you are outlining. That may well be in his mind, but I don't think these pressures will go away. Or for that matter, even if he wins the election, that part of what happened during the war against LTE will disappear from international discussions.
They won't be able to try him. He would not be.
No,
he would be immune from.
I'm coming to that. I think China now is a very solid friend, and China will play a very major role in trying to protect him from that. And India also would have to take very delicate decisions whether they would expose him, willing to expose him to that kind of international pursuit, criminal pursuits against him. But yes, I think this will be very much on his mind and would be certainly one of the factors which might have impelled him. But I would rather agree that it's more what is happening inside Sri Lanka, the erosion of the coalition, and the fact that because of price rises and inflation and other issues like that, and the loss in provincial elections, he feels that if he goes to the polls now and wins the mandate, it will be much easier doing it now than 2 years later, when probably he would have run the risk of losing the election losing the election much more than is likely now.
Much weaker than what he is today.
But on the international pressures, do you agree with him that there are international pressures on him?
No, there are international pressures, but I don't think that that's a decisive factor. I mean, it may be, but international pressures, if he mobilizes nationalism, which he is trying to mobilize, that look, there was a deliberate attempt on the part of Norway and the Western community to save LTT, to save Prabhakar.
He's charged that they funded the LTT.
Yes. And he has all these stories on the basis of which he mobilized the entire Sri Lankan Sinhala opinion, which he can continue to. And when it comes of nationalism, there would be different reactions. So I don't think so that's a decisive pressure.
But it is one of the factors.
That is a pressure, no doubt about it.
Okay. Srinivas, what could be the domestic economic pressures working on him? Ambassador Sibul hinted at it. The economy is going down, the foreign exchange reserves are dwindling, inflation is going up. So does he think that he can win an election now and maybe then set the economy right? So is the economy a factor?
Yeah, economy is definitely a factor. Post the war, during the recovery phase after the war, the kind of economic policies that were pursued in Sri Lanka were a lot of financialization, credit-driven economy, also the military playing a major role in the economy. So these have not resulted in productive investment in terms of creating jobs, improving livelihoods, improving traditional livelihoods which are under threat. The plantation sector, that's in crisis. And also in the north in particular, the war-torn north, that's not necessarily recovered entirely. There are some sprouts of recovery here and there, but one could say that. So in some sense, yes, there is discontent, economic discontent against Rajapaksa. But to an earlier point, I think Rajapaksa has played the international pressure card very well. He has managed to create an impression that the international community is out to get him, and therefore that's an affront to Sinhala Buddhist nationalism. At the same time, he has also used the divisions in the international community very well. So he has cultivated a good relation with China. He has in that way he has tried to mitigate the pressure that the international community has tried to.
But what you're saying is, the sense I get is that there was every reason for him to hold an election now rather than wait for 2 more years.
Absolutely, economic, international, but mainly domestic political.
Okay, we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the snap presidential election called in Sri Lanka. Professor Muni, how come the Sri Lankan opposition developed such a quick consensus on a common candidate, and that too on a defector from the president's own party? Why did they suddenly drop people like former President Chandrika Kumaratunga, whose name was doing the rounds, UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe, UNP Leadership Council Chairman Karu Jayasuriya, former Chief Justice Shirini Bhandar Naike, and many others, including Ranatunga, the cricketer. So everybody was suddenly dropped, and within a few hours, they settled on a defector from the president's own party. How did that happen?
I can tell about two very definitely. Chandrika herself was not interested in contesting for various reasons, and even personally I know it. And Ranil cannot win against Rajapaksa. In fact, Ranil has been a serial loser for various reasons. And there are a lot of controversies even within the UNP on Ranil's candidature. Now, these two were dropped, and why Maithripal was chosen? Because that actually brings a big fissure in the fortification which Mahinda Rajapaksa has been doing. Because no one outsider could really pose the challenge which he would be able to do that. So I think it was and it is amazing that the president did not know that he is defecting until a couple of hours before actually the defection.
Although Maithripala later on said that he had been in touch with the opposition for several weeks.
Yes. No. Therefore, it's I would say it's almost a coup on Rajapaksa so far as Maithripal's selection is concerned. And now what he will do is to have an advantage of both the UNP votes on the one hand, including Ranil's support for whatever worth it is, and Chandrika's support, which still has constituencies, may not be very strong within the SLFP and within the Sinhala liberal constituencies.
Ambassador Sibbal, taking off from what Professor Muni said, see, one of the things that President Rajapaksa did was he alienated the old guard. And he, in fact, gave importance to defectors from UNP and JVP, the Janta Vimukta Parimuna. Now, we've already seen defection of some MPs along with Maitri Sena. 20 more are apparently planning to defect and support the candidature of Maithripala Sena. So, do you think that actually his party is in effect splitting and that he will get the opposition vote plus he might get the grassroots Sri Lanka Freedom Party vote?
Yes, I think so. That's the game plan, and that's why they've agreed on a common candidate, which is why Ranil Wickremesinghe is not a candidate. As he rightly said, that he's lost twice earlier.
But he's been promised prime ministership.
He's been promised prime ministership, which is a good thing. It's a bit like what's happening in Afghanistan. You bring the opposite factions together and make one the prime minister and other the president. Plus, I think he might get the Tamil vote also. He would get the Tamil vote also. Besides dividing the Sinhala vote, he'll also get the Tamil vote this time, including the Tamil Muslim vote. So I think this is a good strategy on the part of the opposition to oust the Rajapaksa family from power. And the feeling that he's concentrated too much power within the family and he's autocratic, he's suppressing freedoms. This is serious charges against him. So I think
on the clearly running a very powerful police state that he didn't even know that his number two was negotiating with the opposition.
Maybe they knew that what the nature of the police state was and these people being inside the government. After all, he was the general secretary of the party. So probably played their cards extremely well and protected themselves from this kind of eavesdropping about their political activities.
Srinivas, do you agree with Ambassador Sibbal that the Tamil and the Muslim vote will go to Maithripala Sirisena? Or which way will the Tamils and the Muslims vote, and how important would be ethnicity in this election?
The TNA, the Tamil National Alliance, which is the largest Tamil coalition now, they haven't as yet taken a decision to support Sirisena's candidacy, but I think that's fait accompli. I think sooner or later they would support his candidacy. They made a tactical mistake the last time around when they gave a last-minute support for Saras Fonseca, who was, after all, the general who led the campaign against the LTT. But this time, Sirisena is not that much of a controversial figure as Fonseca is, and perhaps the Tamil political leaders could actually, convince their electorate that they aren't really, supporting a candidate who's controversial in their eyes. That's one thing. But at the same time, ethnicity does matter here. But the problem for the Tamils and the Muslims is that there is no ideal horse to back. For one, the JVP, the JHU, the Jatiya Hela Urumaya, which is a conservative Buddhist party, is now going to be part of the opposition, and they are staunch Sinhala Buddhist nationalists. At the same time, the Rajapaksa regime has given patronage to sections like the Bodhabala Sena and others who have targeted the Muslims and so on. So possibly the Muslims would prefer to, ideally prefer to support the opposition candidate. But as I said, it's not an ideal. There are no ideal options for the, for the minority community to back, and that's the nature of Sri Lankan politics now.
Professor Muni, the opposition candidate, Maithripala Sirisena, or even this opposition coalition that has come together, they are for a unitary constitution. They are not federalists. So what do Tamil really stand to gain by supporting Maithripala Sirisena? I'll quote what he said. His agenda, he said, I quote, I will abolish the executive presidency in 100 days after being elected as president. I will restore the rule of law by reactivating the 17th Amendment to the Constitution and make the police elections, public service and the judicial service commissions fully independent. The president will be answerable to the legislature, and I would create a people's government that enjoys real peace, prosperity and happiness, etc. But he said nothing about the 13th Amendment. He said nothing about the LLRC, the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, whether he would implement their recommendations. So what do the Tamils really stand to gain by supporting him?
Well, I am not very sure if Tamil would en bloc vote for the opposition candidate, because Rajapaksa in all these past 10 years roughly has successfully already fragmented Tamil constituencies. You know, he has a couple of ministers. He won over Karuna from the east, who was a... And even within the LTT rank, even the guy who was doing arms business in Thailand, he has been able to woo them over. And how long he would succeed in playing on these divisions amongst the Tamils will actually decide the outcome. You are absolutely right that no hardline Sinhala president can ever inspire Tamil votes. And Maithripal is also considered a hardline Sinhala, but his support base is more liberal. And that may be one factor as compared to Rajapaksa. May I say one more sentence on why within his party people are coming out? Because, you know, within his party, it's almost 73 to 75% of the union, the country's budget, which is controlled by the family.
90 departments, 94 to be exact.
Yeah, but I'm saying percentage because I remember some other conversation. Anyway, in addition to this control, he was not letting anybody else come in the limelight. It is Gotabaya, it is Basil, you know, it's a family, and his son he was trying to groom. So party was getting alienated from him that here is a person who is not taking the party on the board.
Okay. All right, we need to take a break at this point again. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the snap presidential election in Sri Lanka. Ambassador Sibul, why is the abolition of the executive presidency such a big issue, and why is Rajapaksa being held responsible for it? It was J.R. Jayawardene who made the presidency an executive presidency. Chandrika Kumaratunge said that she would be the last executive president and she would abolish executive presidency. So why is that a big issue that in 100 days they will abolish executive presidency?
Because it become too powerful. And when you have a presidential form of government, it's a different kind of democracy. And we have a debate even in South Asia as a whole, whether we should have a prime ministerial cabinet kind of a government or a presidential form of government, because a presidential form of government can easily lead to a kind of a dictatorship in a country where the democratic spirit and the democratic environment is not that mature. So it's in that sense that a presidential system is less accountable directly to the elected people, etc., etc. So therefore I can understand why this debate is occurring. And since there are accusations that the Rajapaksa family, and we just discussed this, how much they're controlling of the national budget and the various departments that you mentioned, clearly this concentration of power is riling the political classes and public opinion, and they want a change and a weaker president and a prime minister to be able to balance the political equations at the highest levels of government in the country.
Srinivas, but hadn't this problem become acute earlier also? Otherwise, why would Chandrika Kumaratunga say that I would be the last executive president? So what were the reasons which made executive presidency a problematic system in Sri Lanka?
You're right. During Chandrika Kumaratunga's tenure, the tendency was to loosen these strings of power that was concentrated in the executive presidency, and that's why you had the 17th Amendment, for example, which actually somewhat divested powers away from the president in the form of creation of Constitution Council and so on. But after Rajapaksa came to power in 2010, there was the 18th Amendment, the controversial 18th Amendment, which actually usurped some of those powers which are actually delegated before. Also, not just constitutionally and structurally, but politically even, the executive presidency was always striving for a fight against anyone, if it is the judiciary. For example, there was this impeachment proceedings against an activist judge who actually took very solid and sound decisions on distributions of. This was a bill that related to financial pass being distributed to local councils, which was instead being usurped by the finance minister of economic reconstruction, who was the brother of the president. So while powers were concentrated in the executive presidency, 10 years ago there was a movement towards further democratization and inclusive governance, but now this has actually taken a reverse direction, and you have grotesque ownership of power by the executive presidency.
Not only that, but also he gave himself a third term. He amended the constitution to allow
removal of term limits.
That was the critical point of the 18th Amendment.
Right.
That what he did was that one of the safety valves, that executive president would not last more than 2 terms, he even removed that and actually wanted to personalize it. So obviously this was a major problem.
Mr. Sibal, what has been President Rajapaksa's record of dealing with the international community, and would there be people in the international community who would be happy to see him go if he were to lose the election?
I think so. The West would certainly be happy to see him go, and they would wish that this change occurs. But of course, they can't control the political situation inside Sri Lanka and interfere in elections. But I think Sri Lanka and the president of Sri Lanka has lost a great deal in terms of his international stature. And maybe India would not be too unhappy to see him go either.
Do you agree that India would not be
fully agree
unhappy?
with him. In fact, we are quite restless on the 13th Amendment. And the way he has been dealing with India on 13th Amendment, I think no takers are here in Delhi for Rajapaksa on that issue.
Well, we always bought his argument when he said not only 13th Amendment, but I'll give them 13th Amendment plus.
No,
Forget
fair enough.
plus, he never gave the 13th Amendment.
No, exactly. This is what. No, plus means he said, there are some aspects of 13th Amendment, like unifying North and East, which doesn't seem possible. So we said, okay, if you want to modify it and implement it, no problem. The most critical issue, Bharat, is of federal question. To what extent you are really devolving power to the provinces? That is the critical question on which he was not budging.
But Srinivas, in a small country like Sri Lanka, the Sinhalese would argue that federalism doesn't make much sense. That it's so small that it has to be governed in a unitary fashion, but maybe not in a highly centralized unitary manner, but with the mesh being slightly loosened.
Right, but you can't convince the Tamil people. For example, there's a history that has gone in Sri Lanka, where there has been discrimination.
No, I understand that. I understand. I'm aware of it. I'm merely saying that, yes, there's a Tamil perspective, but there's also a Sinhala perspective, saying that in a small country, you start introducing federalism, and we're seeing this in some other smaller countries in our neighborhood, that it can create problems.
Not necessarily. I think decentralization would definitely be good for.
May I interject for a minute, Bharat? Please. The question of federalism is not related to a small or big state. It is related to a diversified state. And if there are communities which do not have an ownership of the state, they would agitate. Okay. Federalism gives a chance, and that's where it applies to Nepal or other smaller countries as well. Therefore, smallness is no argument.
No, that's a very good point.
I would agree with him.
Yeah. But Ambassador, let me ask something different. From the Indian perspective, would it be right to say that the Chinese footprint increased in Sri Lanka like never before under President Rajapaksa? So if you look at the infrastructure projects, you have Hambantota Port, you have the Kattunayake Colombo Expressway being built by the Chinese, the Noracholai Coal Power Project, the Mathara Airport, Colombo South Harbour Expansion Project, Shangri-La Hotel with 661 rooms, Centre for Performing Arts in Colombo. So much so that China has become Sri Lanka's largest foreign investor and lender. So has this been worrying India? Should we be worried at all?
We should be worried, and I think we are worried because Sri Lanka is giving a foothold to China, a very big foothold to China as part of their larger strategy of expanding their footprint in the Indian Ocean, for which they need reliable, stable ports and eventually possibly even bases in order to service not only the commercial shipping, but eventually even their naval forces. And Sri Lanka is playing this game. Actually, they are playing the non-land game between China and India very successfully. It's not as if they're totally annoying India. They're also giving India a role. And India has got a major development role.
Hambantota was offered to India, and we didn't take it.
You're right. But they've succeeded in this, and the fact that the Chinese are investing such large amounts in Sri Lanka is a strategic decision, and therefore it needs to worry us.
Yeah. Okay, on
I think
China.
the cause of worry is, I would say, not as much the expansion of economic footprint of China in Sri Lanka. The cause of worry is many of the commercial propositions being turned into political or strategic propositions. Now, we mentioned Hambantota. I think India should not have taken, because why would you want to have another port to compete with your own ports? But that apart. The problem is that Hambantota, now you have the submarines visiting them. Now, that's where the major concern lies, and that's where the major concern lies all over neighborhood. Otherwise, economically, India is willing to engage with China in any
But
respect.
is Rajapaksa to blame for this?
Which one? Well, Rajapaksa is responsible. If Rajapaksa does not allow, what we have seen is a change in Gwadar, for instance, of a commercial proposition being turned into a naval proposition, and we have indications of that in Hambantota. That must worry India more than any
we are running out of time,
proposition.
so my last question to you. Do you think Maithripala Sirisena would deal with China differently, or would continue to deal, because Sri Lanka's national interests, as the Sri Lankans define them, will continue to be the same?
It would depend upon what kind of pressures he will have to deal with the coalition he has built in. So, for example, if the Tamil community has a better say in the affairs of the state, if some of the liberal voices that Professor Muni pointed about, who talk about greater devolution of power, who talk about the role of
he
India,
might listen to them.
Yeah, he might listen to them.
Okay,
yeah.
you want to add something to this?
I think it will be very difficult to reverse the direction in a substantive way. Though here and there on the sidelines, on the margins, he may be more attentive, the new government, to India's concerns. But I can't see a reversal, because China has become an extremely important factor in Sri Lanka.
All right, we've run out of time. I would like to thank all my guests, Srinivas Ramani, Professor Muni, Ambassador Kamal Sibal, for coming here and analyzing this issue. I'm sure we'll have another opportunity before the election to discuss this further. Thank you very much once again. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week, of course. Till then, goodbye, and thanks for watching.